There are 6 minutes of audio that the world will never hear. 6 minutes that captured screams, tearing flesh, and the final moments of a man who believed love could conquer the wilderness. The camera was running, but the lens cap was on. Only darkness and sound remained. Werner Herzog listened to it once through headphones and told the woman holding the tape to destroy it. He called it the most terrifying thing he had ever heard in his life. What happened in those 6 minutes on October 5, 2003, in the frozen expanse of Katmai National Park, Alaska, wasn't just an animal attack. It was the collapse of a dream. It was the moment when 13 summers of trust, 35,000 hours of companionship, and a man's entire belief system were torn apart by 1,500 pounds of hunger and instinct. And it didn't just take Timothy Treadwell. It took Amy Huguenard too, a woman who followed him into the wild, even though every fiber of her being told her not to. This is the story of a man who thought he could rewrite the rules between humans and bears. A man who petted grizzlies, slept beside them, spoke to them like children. A man who became famous for breaking every safety protocol in the book and somehow survived year after year until he didn't. Because nature doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your love. It doesn't care about your trauma or your mission or the years you've invested. And when you stay too long, when you push too far, when you ignore the warnings that everyone around you is screaming, nature will remind you exactly what you are. Prey. Timothy Treadwell wasn't born to be a bear whisperer. He was born Timothy Dexter in Long Island, New York, in 1957, into a middle-class family that had no connection to the wild. As a kid, he was shy, awkward, desperate to be noticed. He was the type of boy who stood at the edge of the playground watching other kids play, never quite fitting in, never quite understanding why. He dreamed of being an actor, someone who could transform into different versions of himself, someone who mattered, someone people would remember. He moved to California in his 20s with stars in his eyes and a hunger for validation that consumed him. He auditioned for roles he never got. He waited tables. He slept on couches. He came close once, almost landing a part on the sitcom Cheers, but another actor beat him out at the last minute. That rejection broke something inside him, something that had already been cracking for years. He spiraled into drugs and alcohol, drowning himself in substances because the world didn't want the version of himself he was offering. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't special. He was just another failed actor in a city full of them. One night, he overdosed on heroin and nearly did. When he woke up in the hospital, tubes in his arms, machines beeping around him, he made a decision. He would leave behind Timothy Dexter, the failed actor, the addict, the nobody. He would become someone else entirely. He changed his name to Timothy Treadwell and decided that if Hollywood didn't want him, the wilderness would. He would create a new identity, a new purpose, a new story. And this time he would be the hero. He didn't just visit Alaska. He fell in love with it the way some people fall in love with other human beings, obsessively, recklessly, without boundaries or common sense. His first trip to Katmai National Park in 1990 wasn't supposed to change his life, but it did. He saw grizzly bears up close for the first time. Massive creatures with fur that rippled like water, eyes that seemed ancient and knowing, power that radiated from every movement. Most people would have felt fear, would have kept their distance, would have respected the invisible line between human and predator. Timothy felt connection. He felt purpose. He felt like he had finally found the place where he belonged. He came back the next summer, and the summer after that, and every summer for 13 years. He set up camp in an area called the Grizzly Maze, a remote section of the park where bears gathered to fish for salmon during the summer months. He brought a camera, a tent, and nothing else. No gun, no bear spray, no backup plan, no emergency beacon. He believed that if he approached the bears with love and respect, they would accept him. And for a long time they did. He filmed everything. Hours and hours of footage showing him inches away from grizzlies, talking to them in a soft, childlike voice, giving them names like Mr. Chocolate, Rowdy, Sergeant Brown, and the Grinch. He would sit beside them while they fished, touch their fur with trembling hands, even place his face near their massive jaws and whisper to them like they were pets. In one clip, he lies on the ground next to a bear and whispers, "I would die for you. I would die for all of you." In another, he sobs openly, telling the camera that these bears are his friends, his family, the only beings that truly understand him. He created an organization called Grizzly People, claiming his mission was to protect the bears from poachers and raise awareness about their endangered status. He gave presentations to school children, appeared on talk shows, and positioned himself as a warrior for bear conservation. But the truth was more complicated. Timothy wasn't just protecting bears. He was running from his past, from the addiction, the failure, the loneliness that had almost killed him. The bears gave him an identity. They made him feel like he mattered. They gave him the validation that Hollywood never did. But there was darkness beneath the surface. Friends who visited him in Alaska described a man who was becoming increasingly unstable. He would rant about conspiracies, claiming that poachers were everywhere, that the Park Service wanted him gone, that he was the only thing standing between the bears and extinction. He became paranoid, aggressive, volatile. In his later footage, you can see the change. His eyes are wild. His voice cracks with emotion. He films himself having breakdowns, screaming at the camera about how much he's sacrificed, how much he's suffered. In one disturbing clip, he picks up bear feces with his bare hands and smells it, describing it in detail. In another scene, he mimics a bear's behavior, crawling on all fours and growling at the camera in a humorous act of imitation. He was losing touch with reality, and the wilderness was his stage. Park rangers didn't see him as a hero. They saw a man breaking every rule, endangering himself and the animals he claimed to love. They warned him repeatedly, year after year, conversation after conversation. "You're too close. You're conditioning the bears to associate humans with safety. You're going to get yourself killed, and when you do, we'll have to kill the bear that does it." Timothy ignored them. He believed he had a special gift, a connection that science couldn't explain, a bond that transcended the natural order. He gave interviews where he said things like, "I'm the only protection these bears have, and they accept me as one of their own." Scientists and bear experts watched his footage and were horrified. They knew it was only a matter of time. Then there was Amy Huguenard. She was a physician's assistant from Colorado, a quiet, cautious woman who loved Timothy but feared the wilderness. She wasn't like him. She didn't romanticize the bears or see them as spiritual beings. She saw them for what they were, wild predators that could kill without hesitation or remorse. But she loved Timothy, and love makes people do irrational things. She started joining him on his trips to Alaska in the early 2000s, even though every instinct told her not to. Friends later said she was uncomfortable around the bears, that she would stay in the tent while Timothy wandered off with his camera, that she would beg him to be more careful. She never wanted to be there. She went because he asked her to. She trusted him to keep her safe. That trust would cost her everything. Let's talk about grizzly bears because understanding them is essential to understanding what happened. These aren't cuddly creatures. They aren't gentle giants or misunderstood teddy bears. A male grizzly can weigh up to 1,500 pounds, stand 10 feet tall on its hind legs, and run at speeds of 35 miles per hour. Their claws are 4 inches long, curved like daggers, capable of tearing through flesh and bone with a single swipe. Their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush a bowling ball or snap a human spine like a twig. They are apex predators, meaning nothing in their environment hunts them. They fear nothing. They are driven by 3 things: hunger, territory, and survival instinct. They are not capable of friendship with humans. They don't feel gratitude or loyalty. They tolerate humans when food is abundant and they're not threatened. But that tolerance is not affection, it's indifference. And in late fall, when the salmon runs dry and winter approaches, they enter a state called hyperphagia, a desperate feeding frenzy where they consume up to 90 pounds of food per day to build fat reserves for hibernation. During this time, they are irritable, aggressive, and unpredictable. Their entire existence narrows to a single focus: eat. Anything that gets between them and food becomes a threat. Anything that looks like food becomes prey. This is when they are most dangerous. This is when even experienced bear researchers keep their distance. This is when Timothy Treadwell decided to stay. Every year, Timothy left Katmai by mid-September. That was his routine, his safety window. But in 2003, he didn't leave. He stayed into early October, well past the time when the park's summer bears had migrated to their winter dens. He later told friends that he felt something was different that year, that the bears needed him, that he had to stay. But the bears that remained weren't the ones he knew. They weren't Mr. Chocolate or Rowdy or Sergeant Brown. Those bears were gone, already tucked away for winter. The bears that remained were the stragglers, the old, the weak, the desperate ones still searching for food as winter closed in. These bears didn't know Timothy. They didn't have 13 summers of history with him. They didn't care about his mission. To them, he was just another animal in their territory. And worse, he smelled like food. The weather was turning. Temperatures were dropping. The days were getting shorter. Amy wanted to leave. She told Timothy multiple times that they needed to go, that something felt wrong. But Timothy insisted they stay just a little longer. He was waiting for one more shot, one more moment of footage, one more interaction that would prove his connection to the bears. He was chasing something that didn't exist, and Amy, loyal to the end, stayed with him. On October 5, 2003, pilot Willie Fulton flew into the Grizzly maze to pick up Timothy and Amy. They had called him days earlier, confirming the pickup time. They were supposed to be packed and ready, waiting by the lake. But when he landed the float plane on the nearby lake, something felt wrong immediately. The air was too quiet. No voices, no movement, no sign of life. He called out their names, no response. He felt a chill run down his spine. Something had happened. He walked toward the campsite, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. The tent was collapsed, torn in multiple places, stained with something dark. Blood. His stomach dropped. He looked around and saw more blood, drag marks leading into the brush, scattered belongings torn and trampled. And then he saw the bear. A large male grizzly standing near a pile of torn fabric and scattered gear, chewing on something. Willie's blood ran cold. He knew immediately what had happened. He backed away slowly, carefully, not making eye contact, not making sudden movements. He returned to the plane, his hands shaking, and radioed for help. Rangers arrived hours later, armed with rifles and shotguns. The bear was still there, guarding what remained of the campsite. It showed no fear when they approached. It stood its ground, protective of its kill. They had no choice. They shot it. The bear collapsed near the shredded tent, blood pooling beneath its massive body. When they searched the area, they found pieces of Timothy and Amy scattered across the campsite and into the surrounding brush. Bones with teeth marks, shredded clothing, a shoe, a backpack torn open, and a single arm with a wristwatch still attached, half buried in the dirt. The scene was horrific. The bear had been feeding on them for hours, possibly longer. Both bodies were partially consumed. This wasn't a defensive attack. This wasn't a mother protecting cubs. This was predation. The bear had killed them and eaten them because it was starving and they were available. In the tent, among the wreckage, they found Timothy's camera. The tape inside was still running. The lens cap had been on during the attack, so there was no video. But the audio captured everything. 6 minutes of screaming, pleading, the sounds of violence that no human should ever have to hear. The rangers who secured the scene said they would never forget it. The silence of the wilderness afterward, the smell of blood and bear, the knowledge that 2 people had died terrified and alone. The autopsy confirmed what everyone already knew. Timothy died first, likely within the first 2 minutes of the attack. Massive trauma to the head and chest. His skull was fractured, his ribs were shattered. The bear had gone for his upper body, the way predators do when they're trying to kill quickly. Amy died trying to escape. Her body was found further from the tent, suggesting she ran when the attack started. She made it maybe 50 yards before the bear caught her. You can't outrun a grizzly. She died screaming for help that would never come, alone in the wilderness, paying the price for someone else's delusion. The media exploded. Timothy Treadwell's death became international news. debated endlessly by conservationists, animal experts, psychologists, and the public. Some called him a hero who died doing what he loved, a martyr for bear conservation. Others called him reckless, arrogant, a man whose death was entirely preventable and whose actions endangered others. The Park Service released statements emphasizing that Timothy had been warned countless times over 13 years. His death wasn't a failure of the bears, it was a failure of judgment. And Amy, who never wanted to be there, who was only there because she loved him, was largely forgotten in the headlines. She became a footnote in Timothy's story, when in reality, she was the true victim. Werner Herzog, the legendary German filmmaker known for his haunting documentaries, was approached by Timothy's friends to make sense of the footage he left behind. Over 100 hours of video, documenting 13 summers in the wild. Herzog spent 2 years creating Grizzly, a documentary that didn't just tell the story of Timothy's death, but dissected his life, his psychology, his desperate need to be something more than human. Herzog's narration is haunting and unflinching. He doesn't romanticize Timothy. He calls him out for his delusions, his refusal to accept that nature is indifferent, that the bears didn't love him back, that his mission was built on fantasy rather than reality. In one of the film's most powerful and disturbing scenes, Herzog sits across from Jewel Palovac, Timothy's ex-girlfriend and the executor of his estate. She holds the audio tape of the attack, the one found in the camera. She asks Herzog if he wants to listen to it. He agrees. She hands him headphones, and for 6 minutes the camera stays on Herzog's face as he listens. His expression shifts from curiosity to horror to anguish. You can't hear the audio. Only Herzog can. When it's over, he slowly removes the headphones, looks directly at Jewel, and says in his thick German accent, "You must never listen to this, and you should destroy it because it will only bring horror." She never did. The tape still exists, locked away in a safe deposit box, never released to the public, never to be heard by anyone else. The documentary received a 93% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars and called it a masterpiece of non-fiction filmmaking. It's ranked among the greatest documentaries of the 21st century, not because it glorifies Timothy's life, but because it forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human nature. We want to believe that love can conquer anything, that passion and dedication can bend the rules of reality. But they can't. The wild doesn't care about your mission, your trauma, your need to be seen. It will take you the moment you let your guard down. Timothy Treadwell's legacy is deeply complicated. Some see him as a tragic figure, a deeply troubled man who genuinely cared about bears and paid the ultimate price for his devotion. Others see him as a cautionary tale, proof that anthropomorphizing wild animals leads to death, both for humans and the animals themselves. The bear that killed him was destroyed, shot by rangers as protocol demanded. 2 other bears found near the campsite were also killed, just in case they had been involved. Conservationists argue that Timothy's actions did more harm than good, conditioning bears to lose their natural fear of humans, putting future visitors at risk, and ultimately causing the deaths of the very animals he claimed to protect. And Amy. Amy Huguenard is often overlooked in this story, but she shouldn't be. She deserves to be remembered not as a side character in Timothy's tragedy, but as a victim of misplaced trust. She wasn't an adrenaline junkie. She wasn't chasing fame or validation. She was simply a woman in love with a deeply troubled man, trying to support him even when it terrified her. Her final moments, running through the brush, screaming for help that would never come, represent the true cost of someone else's obsession. She died because she loved someone who couldn't see past his own need to be special. There's a moment in Herzog's documentary where Timothy films himself breaking down, sobbing uncontrollably, telling the camera that he's ready to die for the bears, that his life only has meaning if it's spent protecting them. He got his wish. But death wasn't poetic. It wasn't noble or meaningful. It was brutal, terrifying, and entirely avoidable. The tape that captured it will never be heard by the world, but its existence haunts everyone who knows it's there. 6 minutes. That's all it took to dismantle 13 years of fantasy, 35,000 hours of delusion. Nature is not a Disney movie. It's not a sanctuary for broken people looking for redemption or purpose. It's cold, indifferent, governed by hunger and survival. The bears Timothy loved didn't mourn him. They didn't remember him. The one that killed him was simply doing what bears do when they are starving and a food source presents itself. Timothy believed he was special, that he had transcended the divide between human and animal, that he had become something more. But in the end, he was just meat. And so was Amy. If there's a lesson here, it's this. Respect has boundaries. Love requires distance. And the wild, no matter how much time you spend in it, will never be your friend. It will tolerate you, ignore you, maybe even coexist with you for a time. But the second you forget what you are, the second you stop seeing yourself as prey in an ecosystem that doesn't care about your feelings, that's when it reminds you. And by then, it's always too late. Timothy Treadwell wanted to be remembered. He is. But not for protecting bears, for proving that even 13 summers, 35,000 hours, and a lifetime of devotion can't change the fundamental truth of the wilderness. You can't love a grizzly bear into loving you back. And when you try, when you ignore every warning, every rule, every instinct that screams for you to leave, the wilderness will answer. Not with malice, not with cruelty, just with hunger, just with the simple ancient logic of predator and prey. The tent is gone now. The campsite is empty. The bears still fish for salmon every summer, oblivious to what happened there, carrying on as they have for thousands of years. But the tape remains. 6 minutes of audio that Werner Herzog called the most terrifying thing he's ever heard. 6 minutes that Jewel Palovac keeps locked away, unable to destroy, unable to forget. 6 minutes that tell the story of a man who loved too much, trusted too deeply, and stayed too long. 6 minutes that remind us that nature doesn't care about our stories. It only cares about survival. And somewhere in that recording, buried beneath the screams and the tearing and the final gasps, is the answer to the question everyone asks. What was Timothy thinking in those last moments? Did he regret it? Did he feel betrayed by the animals he had devoted his life to? Or did he, even as the bear's jaws closed around him, still believe that this was somehow part of the connection he had spent 13 years building? We'll never know. The only witnesses were the bears, and they're not talking.